Welcome. Today we are shooting another episode of the Safer Gambling Talks. Today we are in Dublin and we're going to be talking with Duncan Garvie, who is the founder and trustee of charity named BetBlocker, which provides a blocking software for gambling websites and apps. But there is much more to this person than just a BetBlocker. So let's get into it. You are the man of many talents. And also the man who is a quiet, frequent commentator on LinkedIn. And it's mainly around the areas of players' behavior and players' protection in an online gambling space. And it is no surprise because you have founded the POG something like 13 years ago. And now you are running a BetBlocker charity which offers a blocking software. So your journey in iGaming is quite interesting, and we're gonna be talking about that. But I wanted to focus on the very beginning because when I was looking at your LinkedIn when I was preparing for this conversation, I realized that you started as a teacher, high school teacher, right?
I did.
Teaching mathematics, which you also graduated from.
Yeah.
Which itself, I would say it's an achievement. So I would like to start with this one and not to lose the connection with iGaming. So
We won't.
So how was this? How was this about? I mean, like how did your beginnings as a teacher and your experience in that influenced your further career and your further work in iGaming? And just tell me a little bit more about that.
It kind of almost goes back a step further than that. When I was training to be a teacher, I picked up a book just in the local CD shop in the bargain bucket called Bringing Down the House by an author called Ben Mesrich. And it told the story of the MIT card counting team. And I read the book and I went,
I remember the story.
I could do that. The maths is very simple. I'm very process driven. I can do that. That's not a problem. So I taught myself to count cards. And I was a fairly prolific poster on certain message boards for the Advantage Play community at that time. I ended up making friends and connections in the States, and I travelled and played with a few teams over there. And that was all. That spans the time frame from my teacher training through the first few years of teaching. And during that time, via winnings, I'd managed to put away a sufficient amount that it came to a point in my teaching career where there were going to have to be not layoffs,
Right.
but teachers were going to have to be transferred to other schools.
Right. Sorry, but then does it mean that you were literally going to casinos and trying to apply the technique in order to win?
No, yes, I was
Right. So have you ever been...
playing with teams of people doing that.
So have you ever been kicked out of a casino?
No, my playing career was relatively short.
Okay. So no broken fingers, nothing like that. Threats. You can see the movies.
That's over glamorized. To be honest, I mean, Bringing Down the House, the truth. But I know a lot of the people that the characters in that book are based on. There are a lot of them. The experiences are amalgamated, several people's experience in one character, and exaggerated and whatnot. It's not nearly as high drama is that, in fact, the actual experience of playing on a card counting team is monotonous.
Mm-hmm.
It's a grind. It's sitting at 4 o'clock in the morning, bleary-eyed,
Right, yeah.
grinding out to signal in somebody when the count gets good, and it's
I can imagine it's a lot of work. It's like
It
with
is.
esports, it's not like I'm just playing the game. You are literally playing the game of the top performance. So you need to focus, you need to train, you need to, do stuff, have all the signals in your head.
That's exactly it, and it's you've been playing for 6 or 8 hours straight, and you're just tired.
Mm-hmm.
And then you retreat upstairs to a hotel room, and all of you are sleeping in the same hotel room to keep costs down. So there's just people everywhere. As I say, it's not nearly as glamorous as people envision. It was still fun. It was an amazing experience to have. And I say all that, I mean, I know plenty of people who have been backed off. I know a few who have been detained. And I am aware, I've conversed regularly with one of the big names in that space, who sued a couple of casinos successfully due to his treatment. But yeah, casinos have generally wised up. They that sort of mob mentality from the 60s, 70s has largely died away. It's far more corporate environment.
Yeah. I mean, and I would also imagine that a lot of stuff which you can see in the Hollywood movies would be exaggerated.
Oh,
from
yeah.
it. So I remember when I first saw the movie Casino,
Yeah.
and I was spending a night in not the main Stockholm airport, but there is like a secondary airport, which I do not remember the name. But I was spending the night over there because it was an early morning flight, and I watched the movie, and then I was supposed to sleep a little bit on those chairs over there. And I remember I was waking in the night, feeling like someone is stabbing me to my kidney. So it was a very intense experience for me. But then you went to teaching. You were teaching for how long? 4 years?
Well, that was that sort of period of my life. Yeah, it was 4 years between training and teaching. That period overlapped. I was doing both at the same time, traveling on holidays and whatnot. When the job insecurity developed in teaching, as I said, my job wasn't actually insecure, but there was a chance I could be transferred to another school, and I didn't find that option attractive. So I used the money that I'd managed to put away from playing to take a career break. And it was at that point that I started to develop the POG.
Right. So where did the motivation come from? So now I understand that even with the teaching career, there was a little bit of gambling. And another point is that at the time when you started the book, which was around 2010?
11, I think, but
roughly 11. I would assume that at that time, the affiliation or the online gambling industry as a whole would be more focused on growth, revenue generation, and player acquisition. So does this influence your motivation anyhow?
Not particularly. I was always more interested in the player protection side of things. As I'm sure you can understand, quite an adversarial culture exists between card counters or advantage players and the gambling industry. At the time, and I will be quite clear about this now, I don't see things as black and white as I used to see them.
Yep.
But at the time I started this, I kind of saw the gambling industry as quite predatory. And actually, I won't back away from that statement, because at the time, you have to realise that the regulation wasn't anywhere even approaching what it is today.
definitely.
It was far more of a Wild West.
Mm-hmm.
And the way players were treated was very much up to the operator.
Mm-hmm.
I took influence from Casino Meister,
Yeah.
who basically were the first gambling complaint management service, the first affiliate to really try helping players.
Yeah.
So I took influence from Brian at Casino Meister and decided to set up my own service.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the POG came from. It was always more focused on the player protection side and the industry watchdog dynamic than it was
Mm-hmm.
commercial for me. And that perhaps tells you a little bit about why the POG wasn't more successful as a business.
Right. So it brings me to question, right? Because, okay, now we are 14 years fast forward. Still, I would say that the competition between the affiliates is like the majority of affiliate websites are mainly dealing with player acquisition to get people through their gateway, through their funnel, and to deliver them to the casinos. And was it like that at that time as well? Were you receiving any pushbacks from other affiliates?
There were certainly affiliates that we called out for doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. I've never had the good sense to keep my mouth shut. And we certainly got a lot of pushback from operators who were not happy with the idea of anybody standing up for players.
Yeah.
Over the years, less so in recent times. I don't know how Casino Guru's experience has been with this, but I've certainly received threats from both players and operators within the industry. We've received legal threats, but that's just par for the course. Yes. I'm really referring more to threats of physical repercussions.
I wouldn't necessarily know if there were any like these at the time, because we operate from 2018, 17, roughly. I wasn't with the company at that time, but for sure what I see now is the unsatisfaction from some of the players who do not believe in the integrity of our services. I remember we were discussing it some time ago that, some players you just cannot help. Yeah. Some players are basically not in the right in their dispute.
Yeah.
It would be in the right of a casino, and they might not be necessarily on the same page with you.
Look, there are plenty of players who submit complaints who, before they've ever submitted their complaint and ever interacted with you, have already decided that you're in the operator's pocket.
Yeah.
And as such, nothing that you can ever do or say is going to convince them otherwise. And it's really more about, for them, it's more about them confirming that is the case.
Yeah.
And they tend to come in with weak claims that, in my opinion, subconsciously or in the back of their head, they know are really strong claims. But then they play the outrage and the victim card very hard when you don't support them. And
I feel like that for many, it would be also trying to do that every bit, which might potentially, change the tides for them. More than often, that's not going to happen. That they feel like the more rage they are going to spread across the internet, it's going to help them.
Yeah, there's certainly that dynamic. I would call that type of complaint a shotgun complaint. They don't come in with a single issue of what they've experienced with the gambling operator, but there's a shopping list of all the things, all the sins that have been, and they're spraying it out there in the hope that something sticks. Now, in all fairness, I've reviewed many complaints that have been of that nature, that when I've worked through that shopping list, unpicking the aspects of each claim, I have identified something that has been managed incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, more often than not, these sorts of cases are just throw everything at the wall to see if there's some way to get money back.
Yeah.
And they're quite often indicative. And this is also important. You have to realise with these sorts of claims that they're quite often indicative of somebody who is already on the gambling harm spectrum.
Yes, that's what I was thinking as well, that it wouldn't necessarily be intentional, that these people would be convinced that this is the way forward for them. So for us, this is mainly on like 100% regarding the complaints which are made independently by us. I know that you are dealing with complaints which were resoluted or dealt with independently as a POG, but also you have acted as an official ADR, which, as far as I know, was at the time relatively new. So there was not it was not that widespread to be using the official alternative dispute resolution service. So this arbitrary industry or a process, or how it is supposed to be referred to, was relatively new. So when I was asking about pushback from the affiliates, now for the operators, it must have been something new as well. So what about the pushbacks from the operators? How this was accepted? Now we have ADRs, we need to follow the resolution.
No business is ever going to welcome third-party oversight. It's normal. Nobody likes to be told what to do.
Yeah.
The ADR side of things, yeah, you're absolutely right. It was very new around 2015 to 2016. The UKGC were the first regulator to implement an ADR requirement, requiring their licensees to offer an ADR to review complaints independently. We were the only ADR service that was approved that used an affiliate marketing model rather than direct fee. Most of the other ADRs, they tend to, how they manage things, how they monetize their business, is that they charge operators for each complaint that they manage.
Yeah.
Sometimes they sell it in batches, sometimes it's per complaint, sometimes it's an estimate. We instead offered licensees the service for free and used marketing to generate revenue instead.
Yes.
We were then approved to function in the same capacity for Malta. And there's certainly been a transition there. Now, even today, I would say that there are businesses within the sector that enthusiastically, warmly engage. I work with clients who are proactive and positive, and to all intents and purposes don't view the ADR relationship as an adversarial one, but rather look to take on the feedback and improve what they're doing to prevent future claims.
Yeah, I can relate to that 100%. And it depends company from company
Exactly.
based on what their perception is, what their also experience
Absolutely.
is it. Because if there is a problem and nobody's gonna point to it, then there is no chance for you to somehow fix it, to somehow straighten it up. So we would have operators which would have lots of complaints, but they would approach every complaint very responsibly, trying to make the things right.
Absolutely.
Ideally solve the issues for any future happenings.
Absolutely. And that's great. We foster a relationship with those types of clients and we're very enthusiastic about that type of relationship. That improves everything. It's a win for everybody. It makes our job easy. It improves the service that the operator, the licensee are delivering, and it gives players greater protections. We have also dealt with other clients who are more resistant and see it as more of a closer to a trial, and look to argue their case robustly, perhaps extending beyond what they are legally within their rights to do, because they will argue every case to the absolute end to try and convince you, right? And that's problematic. It's not problematic. It's still manageable, and they are within their rights to take that position.
Yeah.
Personally, from the position of doing the job and from the position of improving the industry, I wish they would take a bit more of a cooperative approach, but that's within their rights. And then you have the third group, who actually, in my experience, has been very, very small. And that is the operators that hit a case where they just point blank refuse to comply. And this actually raises an important dynamic, and why I feel it's so valuable for an affiliate-based complaint service to pursue ADR. When we act as an ADR, we're managing a complaint as an ADR, our compliance rate is very close to 100%. Effectively, in every case, the operator will oblige our ruling. We've had, I think, 2 licensees. In my time acting as an ADR, I've seen 2 licensees refuse to comply with a ruling, and in both cases we discontinued our relationship. Whereas when we manage complaints informally, our success rate at getting operators to comply with our rulings is far less.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I couldn't say, but it's under 50%.
Yeah. And there is a different kind of force, different kind of incentive, or rather say like the push for that casino or an operator to follow it. Because if you do it independently, it would be mainly the market pressure or the reputation pressure.
Yes.
And then it's primarily dependent on how big and how reputable is your website. But I wanted to stay with ADRs for a second, even further. Perhaps there is a misconception, at least might be a misconception in my head. Like this is one of the differences between the independent handling of the cases, the enforcement part. But what about the evaluation part? So when you are signed as an official ADR, you need to follow a certain framework, certain rules. So I will give you an example, and I would be happy if you can make a distinction from it.
Okay.
So, for example, there would be some sort of a predatory rule from the operator for the player, hidden somewhere in the terms and conditions, perhaps saying that if you do this, we are reserving the right to void your winnings. It would be something that reasonably wouldn't be there in the minds of the consumer, that if I'm going to do this, I am risking that my winnings are going to be voided.
Yes.
You can even define it as unfair because nobody reads terms and conditions, nobody goes through them, nobody's looking into every detail. So now, if you handle that case independently, you are going to be following, let's say, the ethical principle. So is this fair? In the real world, when you imagine it, like how this person could have known that they are not allowed to do it. And now compare with ADR, is it in a way, but the person has agreed with terms and conditions, so they should follow it?
No, that's
a misconception.
That
right?
is a significant misconception.
Okay.
Here's why. ADRs are overseen by a regulatory authority, and that regulatory authority expects us to ensure that any rulings we give are compliant with the relevant laws. Now, that includes advertising laws. So, for instance, in the UK, you have the Advertising Standards Agency that defines how advertisements, what is considered legal, what's considered misleading.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be aware of the rules and regulations that the Advertising Standards Agency has in place. You also have your consumer protection laws,
Mm-hmm.
which include regulation relating to the fairness of individual contract terms. So you need to be aware of the laws surrounding that. The simple fact of an operator having a term written down in their contract does not make that term either legal or enforceable.
Mm-hmm.
And ADRs are expected to enforce the law, not the term.
Right. So common sense is included.
Common sense is definitely included. I mean, on the most basic level, I'm just trying to think of examples here. I've seen operators advertising bonuses where they have a 200% bonus.
Mm-hmm.
But this is spread over 3 deposits, and
Yeah.
it's 100% in the first deposit, 50% in the second, and 50% in the third. That's not 200%.
Exactly.
And so when a complaint comes in about that, it doesn't matter that they've spelled this out in the terms and conditions. The advert itself
Mm-hmm.
is non-compliant with advertising standards,
Yes.
and so you rule against them.
One last question regarding the ADRs. So, if, as far as I understand it, having an ADR is prescribed by, I'm not sure if it's the European Union regulation or if it is like every country for itself. For United Kingdom, it wouldn't be European Union, reasonably, but for Malta, is it a part of the European Union
Yes.
prescription? So every
Yes and no.
licensed operator in Europe must have an ADR company with them and must follow it? No.
Not quite. The European Union laws, and actually it does apply to the UK simply because when the UK introduced ADR, it was before Brexit,
Yeah.
and Brexit subsequently happened,
So they kept it.
and they've kept it. They've built out their own laws that basically mirror
Yeah.
very, very closely the European Union standards. The European Union has introduced legislation, and this isn't simply for the online gambling sector, this is for
Everything, yeah.
every commercial sector, encouraging countries to adopt ADR. Now, the thinking behind that is that effectively the court systems are massively overburdened. They're very, very slow. And the simple truth of the matter is most consumers don't find the court systems accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, would you seriously consider suing a business?
Oh, no.
Never mind a major multinational company like a gambling operator, William Hill, or would you seriously consider trying to take them to court? No, the chances are, even if it's for thousands of pounds that they've withheld, you're just going to give that up because the emotional tax, the emotional stress of trying to take a business through the courts is so significant that it's very off-putting. The financial implications can be dire for an underfunded individual consumer as well. ADR is intended to provide consumers an alternative, more easily accessed alternative to the court systems. However, this is guidance, and it is up to not only each member state,
Yeah.
but each sector to decide whether they're implementing this or not.
So it's on the shoulders of the authority in that specific sector, in that specific country, whether they are going to require it.
Exactly, and look, there are pros and cons to implementing an ADR system.
Mm-hmm.
From a regulatory perspective, managing player disputes can be very resource intensive.
Mm-hmm.
It requires a huge amount of manpower, lots of hours. So outsourcing that is a positive to the regulator.
Yeah.
It also puts a degree of separation between the regulator and any decision that's made. So if the management of a case was to ever attract press attention in a negative sense, the regulator can then say, well, that was the ADR's decision and we will take appropriate action against the ADR.
Yeah.
They don't have to take responsibility for it themselves.
Business.
Yeah, exactly. The political advantages to doing so. I would still argue that there's huge positives to it for consumers as well. Don't get me wrong. There are, as I say, there are strengths and weaknesses in the ADR system. It does provide a far more accessible option than trying to take an operator to court. It provides an option that will resolve a dispute far faster than the courts will manage.
Yeah.
But it also requires robust oversight. And I question whether ADRs are... We have to comply with regulatory standards and reporting and whatnot. But I question whether there is enough diligence shown in questioning why there are disparate ruling levels between ADRs.
Yeah.
So there are still flaws in there. Sorry, I've sidetracked myself. What was the question?
Yeah, I don't even know at that point. But I think that we can just let it be with the ADRs at this point and move forward to what is with the POG now.
Well, let's see, we're in 2024. So in 2023, I sold the POG, the business I founded, to another organisation who have rebranded it to casinoreviews.com. I've stayed on with the new owners as the head of ADR services. So we've got approval for, again, the UK and Malta to manage complaints officially. And we'll be looking to grow that service and onboard new clients as we go. I'm leading up the complaints team. In a lot of ways, it's a positive. When I was running the POG, I was overseeing all aspects of that business.
Yeah.
Managing the ADR service at Casino Reviews ring fences me entirely from the commercial aspects of the business, which prevents any perception of bias. I mean, the outcome of any complaints doesn't influence me at all.
But I can imagine it must have been difficult for you to basically give away your baby.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it wasn't without. It wasn't a loss in certain ways, but at the same time, I acknowledge what my strengths and my weaknesses are. The POG developed a very credible brand, an authority brand in the sector, and I'm very proud of that. I'm fiercely proud of that. But I wasn't great at the commercial side of things. I wasn't great at the SEO side of things that would really be needed to drive the business forward and see it grow to where it should be. Being able to focus on what is my strengths while allowing other people in a bigger team to take over the aspects that I didn't enjoy dealing with anyway.
It's admirable that you are saying that, because some decisions are right, even though you might not like them. But on the other hand, it gave you more space to be spending on your second baby, if we can put it like that.
First child and second child.
Yes, which is BetBlocker.
Yeah.
Which, as far as I know, is the only free and anonymous gambling software and websites blocking app that you can get.
Yeah.
You have founded it some 7 years ago. So at the time where you...
2017, so yeah.
Yes, at the time when you were still working on the POG fully. So Tell me a bit more about this journey. So I understand the motivations, which have always been there, started from the time when you were counting cards to provide something that protects the players. But I would like to hear the story from the beginning. Like what was the tipping point, or what was the time when you started considering it? I might develop a blocking app.
Well, around about 2016 to 2017, the POG started to see quite a sharp increase in the number of gambling harm related complaints we were seeing. And I'm sure your team will have seen similar complaints, but I encountered some properly traumatic issues.
Yeah.
And we couldn't help every player. That's the reality. There were operators that wouldn't talk to us, or there were circumstances where, well, things actually just got out of control before anybody could reasonably have caught them. It wasn't the operator's fault, but that doesn't stop you empathizing with the life circumstances that these people have found themselves in. Now, this rise in gambling harm related complaints wasn't indicative of a sudden jump in the number of gambling addicts. That wasn't what was happening. What was happening is that the UKGC license had come in to force a few years before, and consumers were becoming more aware that they had rights.
Yeah.
And so more of them were complaining. I mean, I was seeing complaints from non-UK players citing UK regulations because they didn't understand that the UK regulations only applied to UK players.
Yes. There's still many don't understand it, or they just wouldn't care.
No. And dealing with these high tariff cases, I started to feel that we needed to do a better job of signposting other support that we could direct these people to. And my first thought was blocking software. The reason I thought blocking software is it should be the first step. Let's get a barrier in place that prevents access to gambling, and that will buy us some time to explore what the treatment options are and how to properly address the problem. It buys us a little space to take that journey. And I was maybe a little bit naive at the time, but I looked at all the blocking softwares on the market and I was shocked to realise that they were all subscription-based. When we're talking about gambling, people who have experienced gambling harm, they have one major thing in common. They've all lost more than they could afford to lose.
Yeah.
It is one of the principal markers of harm for this condition. So when I'm dealing with somebody who doesn't know how they're going to pay next month's rent, isn't sure where they're going to get, how they're going to get food on their table, or where they're going to buy their kids' school uniform, telling them that they have to go and pay to get help is exacerbating one of the primary markers of harm for me.
It could be a barrier for some, I can imagine. But how exactly the software works? What you need to do in order to install it? So you download it, you install. Is it like you can put different devices in it?
You need to download it on each device individually. It is free. It is anonymous to use. You download it, and we have a couple of different types of block. So firstly, we have our primary block. Now this is for people who want to stop, really, or want to take a break from play. So it's a continuous block. You go through and you select your options. You can block just gambling operators. You can add in gambling information sites, so affiliate sites like Casino Reviews and Casino Guru,
right.
yeah. if you feel that they're triggering for you and you want
Yes.
to, you can add them to your restriction. You can select how long you'd like to block. So currently we offer from 24 hours right up to 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and you activate it.
Does it also have like stocks trading apps?
Yes.
Things like
We're looking to improve that at the moment. Right now, your Forex and binary
yeah.
sites are just included in our gambling block. We would like to develop that further, so that's a separate option.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do have people that complain that they didn't understand that Binance was going to be included in this block, and we would rather signpost that appropriately. But that's a feature that's on our to-do list. It will happen. It's just going to take us a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So that's our first type of block, is the continuous block. And I should also be clear, I mean, this is a quick process.
Mm-hmm.
You can go from looking up the app in Google to blocked in under 2 minutes on both Android and iOS.
Mm-hmm.
The second type of block is approaching the problem from the opposite end. Rather than supporting somebody who has already crossed the line of harm,
Yeah.
what we're looking to do is harm minimization.
Yeah.
So it's what we call our scheduling tool.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows you to look ahead and say, well, actually, I'd like to make sure my bills are paid before I play. So I'm going to look up my payday and I'm going to set the block to come on for a week after payday every month.
Mm-hmm.
Or I know that Saturday the football's on, I have a few beers, that's when I'm at risk of gambling a bit too much. So I'm going to block Saturdays. The idea is to empower players to manage their own gambling. You know better than we do when you're at risk.
Exactly.
So you decide when you're going to be blocked.
And then it is bringing the empowerment to the person.
Exactly.
So in my perception, and I am sure that there would be research on it, then if there is an empowerment, the people are more likely to follow that schedule and stick with it, in contrary to sticking with something that was just prescribed.
Absolutely. We actually have on staff a clinical psychologist who has been Pedro Romero, who has
our
been
good friend Pedro.
who has been absolutely fantastic, and it's really interesting to get his insight because he specialises in the treatment of gambling harm. He's studying for his doctorate right now, and he still treats patients every week. In fact, he volunteers his time for the Rock Clinic in Brighton to provide low-cost, affordable treatment for gambling addiction. He coordinates a whole network of practitioners for the Rock Clinic, which is absolutely fantastic. But it's getting insight from him where he'll talk about how gambling addiction, but not just gambling addiction, effectively any addiction, if you tell somebody your choice is on or off, either block, stop or don't, most of them will find that too daunting and they're not ready to make that commitment to just never gambling again.
Yes.
But if you say, well, why don't you try not gambling this week? And let's chat about it again next week. By the time they've achieved a week, they're feeling positive about it. They feel proud that they've managed that. And then, well, let's try another, and you can build it up from there.
There is so much, in my opinion, what the behavioral psychology can teach us and can be beneficial for gambling and for online gambling and stuff like that especially. So how difficult is it to go around it, to uninstall it?
I'm going to be careful about what I say here. We the last thing I want to do is tip anybody off to potential vulnerabilities.
All right, perhaps we can rephrase the question and put it into what is the difference, because it sounds very much like a self-exclusion.
Yes.
But there are different kind of areas that it can cover. There is a different kind of process. So what would you point out as main differences?
The main difference is self-exclusions place the responsibility on the gambling operator to stop you playing.
Mm-hmm.
Blocking software...
Guarding the gate.
Yeah, exactly. Blocking software puts the responsibility in your hands, the power in your hands. You choose to block. The major difference between self-exclusions and blocking software, however, is the gaps, effectively. Even in, for instance, if you take the UK license, if you self-exclude one property on a license, the licensee is required to exclude you all the properties on that license. But you could still go to a different license and play.
Roughly 599
and
brands in the UK.
Then you look at a tool like GamStop, and I want to be very clear, I think GamStop's a fantastic tool. The data shows that it's very successful at supporting players. When you self-exclude via GamStop, the National Self-Exclusion Register, you are excluded all licensed operators at one go. But you can go to a black market operator because GamStop requires the cooperation of the gambling business to exclude you. If a black market operator isn't going to cooperate with GamStop, and as such, the protection.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
They won't.
Whereas when you use blocking software, we don't need the cooperation of the gambling operator to restrict you. So we can restrict you at every gambling operator in one go. Now, I say every gambling operator, there are always gaps. The black market is tough to keep up with, but we have various tools that help us with that. We have some scraping tools that do it automatically. We conduct manual checks on well-known affiliate sites that promote black markets gambling operators. And actually, the truth is the biggest resource we have to ensure our block covers the black market effectively is our users. Within the app, we have what we call our suggest a site feature. If a user encounters a site that they think should be blocked but isn't, they can report it.
Yeah.
Now, most of the time, it's a setting that needs changed. It is already on our list, and them reporting it gives us a tip off that user needs some technical support.
Yeah.
But we also have tens of thousands of people actively using BetBlocker every day. So our users catch new sites far quicker than we could. And it only takes one user to report it, to block it for everybody.
It actually can be very beneficial when you have this like community-driven whistleblowing.
It's funny. I think that I see BetBlocker as this sort of strange community app. None of the people ever know each other. They never interact with each other, but they're all supporting each other by reporting any weaknesses. It's an odd dynamic.
It is. But with whistleblowing or without, no self-exclusion system is going to be 100% reliable.
Absolutely not.
I think that by design, self-exclusion is imperfect. And what it does is basically distancing you from the gambling opportunity, increases the friction which you can go through if you want to gamble, which is then increasing the chances that you're gonna just stop and you're gonna remain in that safe space of yours.
Look, layers of friction. That's the phrase I would use, and I'm very fond of. No, there's no such thing as a perfect self-exclusion. And anybody who tells you that blocking software could be perfect
No.
isn't being honest.
But still, blocking softwares are currently the only solution which is providing sort of international self-exclusion out there. You cannot achieve it right now anywhere by the means of the proper self-exclusion. And that was the reason why we have partnered together with
Absolutely.
our Global Self-Exclusion Initiative, which is basically aiming for establishment of a global or an international system which would be able to cover different jurisdictions. And I wanted to talk about that for a bit, and I will start with me because it has been more than 3 years now since we have launched it. The development was mainly on my shoulders, but when I say development, I would mean like exploring, because the project is mainly a campaign. That is why it is an initiative. So seeking and looking for ways how that could be achieved, because it is not something that you can do from one position, from one place. It is something that requires collaborative action with different kind of stakeholders, and there is a lot of issues connected with it. And after we have set out our first proposal, how to do it, we've spent a few years trying to, chase it. I think that it has shown to be not effective. The main idea was to have a voluntary participation from the operators, and we weren't really able to receive a strong commitment from any operators. And we could be talking about it, but I would rather focus on why the BetBlocker is the great addition to it, especially at this moment, because it provides something usable, something which is practical and can be used by the players, because our campaign targets two groups. Operators, the online gambling industry, the people working in, the people who can shape the environment for the players, but also the players themselves. And the second part, the latter one, wasn't intended. We have launched the initiative because we wanted to help the players, but not through the players.
Yeah.
But as it has turned out, the call to action, the form, the contact form, which we have on our website, which was intended for industry professionals to get in touch because they would maybe want to know some more about the campaign, is being used by the players all the time. Yeah. We would receive a couple of emails, messages in a week from people who wants to self-exclude.
Yeah.
So when we saw that, we wanted to fill out this gap. And now there is something that they could use. It is not a global self-exclusion, but it is something that can help them.
Look, the Global Self-Exclusion Initiative, from the very first time I heard about it, I thought, you're setting your...
Lunatic, right?
Yeah, you're setting your goals very high.
Yeah.
But that doesn't... That's not to disparage it in any way, shape or form. The reality about that is, it was always going to be a very challenging project to get over the line, but the project is about more than simply achieving, setting up the system. It's about creating the dialogue that's necessary to keep all of the relevant stakeholders communicating and working out how we can improve what we do have. You don't set mundane goals. You shoot for the moon and see what you can achieve. And I think the Global Self-Exclusion Initiative has achieved a lot of good in the sector. It has created the dialogue that wasn't going on without that project. Yes, there are always going to be challenges. If you look at the likes of even the likes of the national self-exclusion schemes, Crux, GamStop,
Spell pause.
Spell pause, that's the one I was looking for. I don't know, did Oasis in Germany ever get off the ground?
I think it did.
Yeah.
Because when I was looking and searching casinos not on Oasis, there was a lot of results on that. So definitely it must work because there is a
black market.
There is a market targeting these people.
But the reason that these projects work within defined objectives is that the regulator requires participation.
Yeah.
When you have, as you were just pointing out, black market operators who are specifically targeting players who have signed up to these self-exclusion programs, their business model is never going to fit with agreeing to volunteer to be part of an exclusion project.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to create greater international cooperation and a greater focus on providing the tools to allow players, to empower players to manage their own access to gambling. And I think that's a really important dialogue to have. Yes, I think BetBlocker sits perfectly, symbiotically alongside that sort of project. Again, as I was saying earlier about the national self-exclusion schemes, we approach the problem from the opposite end. This project is the self-exclusion initiative is approaching it from trying to get the industry to take responsibility. We provide the tools to the player to empower themselves. Neither is perfect. Neither is perfect, and there are plenty of flaws and vulnerabilities in blocking software that we could discuss at some other time. Within confines of not tipping anyone off. But blocking software is far more effective when used in conjunction with the other tools that come with the Global Self-Exclusion Initiative. And likewise, initiatives like that are far more effective when used in conjunction with blocking software.
Yeah.
There is no magic bullet to solve gambling addiction.
But I think it falls down to the thing that is being repeated almost every time, that the key to combat the gambling related harm is in collaboration.
Absolutely.
Even though you wouldn't see that all the time necessarily, because you would be able to see a lot of things that are different in between different parties within the online gambling space, different stakeholders, which is a shame because you should have a different parts of the spectrum. That's what all inclusivity is all about, to have different point of views, different perspectives, but they should all work together in a common goal and not fight with each other.
We are so much greater than the sum of our parts when we work together. This frustrates me a lot in the dialogue around gambling harm at the moment, is how the stakeholders compete with each other and undermine each other, and there's constant bickering. There hasn't been the will to find a collaborative voice, and I think that's limiting what we can do to mitigate gambling harms. This goes right down to the fundamentals, where you're seeing increasing dialogue that's trying to segment the harm prevention charities from the industry. And I could not disagree with that any more strongly. When we put a divide between the charities supporting those that are harmed and the industry, we discourage the dialogues that need to occur.
Yeah.
The learnings that can be shared between these organisations. Just from the point of view of BetBlocker, the people that most need our help, the first first organisation they will come in contact with is a gambling operator.
Mm-hmm.
If we stop talking to the operators aren't going to as effectively signpost our support.
Yeah.
We need to maintain these, not just maintain, encourage these dialogues, encourage everybody to work towards better outcomes, not put walls up, not stigmatise, not blame. Let's find better solutions.
Mm-hmm. To find that common space in the middle. We already ran out of time, but I wanted to finish this very fruitful conversation with some sort of a positive note or something that people can take away from this, because there is a shared aspect of the both of the works of the both of us, which would be offshore gambling, cross-jurisdiction gambling, black what?
Black market.
Black market, that's the word, right. And it is a difficult nut to crack, how to reduce it, how to make people gambling with your locally licensed offer. And it can go through the regulation, it could go through the self-regulation, but what I would like to hear from you is that what would be your way how to approach it? What do you think needs to be done in order to decrease the amount, not the exposure, but the amount of people turning to the black market, playing there, engaging for whatever reasons?
That's a very, very big question.
That's why I saved it for the end.
and there's no easy answer to it. The truth is, I mean, we've been seeing issues with illegal gambling for 2 decades, and nobody's come up with an effective solution. I don't think there is. Again, there's not a magic bullet to this problem. We need to again foster dialogue and cooperation with various stakeholders in the sector, the internet service providers, Google, the social media platforms, to restrict how easily the black market can access consumers that they are not legally allowed to access. But alongside that, we need to acknowledge that in this technology-driven age, it will never be all that challenging to access an illegal operator.
Yeah.
And that being the case, we have to manage regulation sensibly. Regulation has to achieve 3 things. It has to protect consumers. It has to ensure that the industry meets the market demand, what the consumers want. And it has to ensure that the industry can thrive. Now, the problem with these 3 legs on a stool, if you like, is that they compete with each other.
Yeah.
What helps one don't
necessarily play along all the time.
Undermines another. Where we enforce regulation that prioritizes only protecting vulnerable players, and we stop the licensed market meeting the market demand, we encourage consumers to seek the black market to meet that market demand.
Yeah.
And sadly, the black market, consumers effectively lose every right when it's not just that they no longer have to deal with the KYC or verification process. That might be what they're trying, what they want. But in going to the black market, they end up with no rights in terms of complaint management. They can't take their complaint to court. There's no advertising standards. There's no responsible gambling protection. There's no oversight on game integrity, so you see fake games being deployed and players being cheated en masse.
Yeah. I read that lengthy article of yours focused on that.
I do tend to go on, as we've already seen.
Yeah, so to conclude with, it's an alchemy, and even the regulators, they do not have an easy job
No, they
because
certainly don't. I feel really sorry for the regulators trying to manage this.
yes,
issue.
I recently heard some of the regulators saying like, if you wanted to please people around you, you should have been selling ice cream and not regulate gambling because
It's a thankless job. It is. No matter what rule you try and put in place, somebody will have a problem with
Yeah.
it. I do not envy them the role, but I do think that regulators need to take more of a focus on data-driven policy rather than policy that appeases those that are shouting the loudest.
yeah. Thank you for these final notes. I see it as an evolution. Online gambling is still very young,
Yeah.
so there is. I think that there is a reason why we are still figuring it out, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll be able to figure it out. So yeah, it was a great conversation
Thank you.
Here
It's
in-
a pleasure to be here.
here in Dublin. So unfortunately, we were not doing that with pints of Guinness.
Would have been nice.
Yeah, but we can have some afterwards.
Yeah.
So there is a. Do you know what does it mean splitting the G with Guinness?
No, I don't, but I'm undereducated on Guinness culture.
I learned it yesterday,
Right.
and it's quite funny. So when you have a pint of Guinness, at the place where is the logo
Uh-huh.
with Guinness, you should for the first sip,
yeah,
you should
I-
sip as much that it would reach
Halfway,
the G
yeah,
in the
yeah.
middle. That is the proper amount of beer you should drink on the first sip.
Right, okay, well, we'll have to try that out in
Yeah, definitely.
15 minutes' time.
Okay, thank you, Duncan. It was great.
Thanks very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Great.